All right, everyone, hello and welcome to today's webinar, Comply, Engage, Amaze, How to Make Regulatory Training Matter. So I'm going to go ahead and get things started here. So our presenters here today, first of all, my name is Stephen Bowler. I am the Marketing Director at Bottom Line Performance, and I'm going to be your moderator. So I'll be taking your questions, kind of monitoring that as we go, and I'll take care of our housekeeping items at the beginning and end of our presentation. And we've got two great speakers for you today, and I'll let them fully introduce themselves when they take over here in just a couple minutes. But real briefly, we have Linda Ann Hall, the EHS Training Manager at the Mosaic Company, and also our own Jennifer Bertram, the Director of Instructional Design here at Bottom Line Performance. Now, this is part of our ongoing Lessons on Learning webinar series. Today's webinar, Comply, Engage, Amaze, is one of several webinars that we've done this year. We've covered topics every other month on things like training analysis, agile learning design, how to use games as part of sales enablement, and mobile learning. And we do have one more webinar coming up in December, which I'll talk about here at the end of this webinar, a very special webinar to launch a new app in our Knowledge Guru product family. So it's been a great year of hosting webinars, and I want to thank special thank you to those of you that have attended a few of them this year. Really appreciate it. So for those of you that aren't familiar, we are Bottom Line Performance. We're a custom learning solutions company. We've been around for almost 22 years now. We design and develop whatever the right learning solution is for each of our clients, whether that's e-learning, some sort of instructor-led training, mobile, games or gamification, or some sort of blend of all of those approaches. That's really who we are and what we do. And our client that we're presenting with today is the Mosaic Company. They are the world's leading integrated producer and marketer of concentrated phosphate and potash. They employ nearly 9,000 people in 6 countries and participate in every aspect of crop nutrition development. So I'm going to turn things over to Jennifer, and she's going to talk about our agenda today.
Thanks, Steve, and hello, everyone. It's really nice to get to spend an hour with you today and share with you a project that Lynn and I are both really proud of. So, as Steve mentioned, my name is Jennifer Bertram, and I'm the Director of Instructional Design here at Bottom Line Performance. I've had the privilege of working here with lots of different clients for 9 years. And prior to that, worked in both public accounting and financial services, all highly regulated environments. And so it's really one of my great privileges in my role to be able to partner with clients like Linda to help develop solutions that are really meeting a problem and that we really think will help change learner behavior. So our agenda for our hour, we're going to cover a lot, as always. And so we're really going to start with looking at the challenges that we had, many of which I think you'll relate to, even if you're in a different kind of industry than mining. We're then going to share with you the solution and what we created and try to share with you a variety of the kinds of interactions that we use to help with learner engagement and to meet our goals, and hopefully you'll see something there that you can take back into your world. Then we're going to look at the pilot process and what we did to really get that buy-in early from both internal and external stakeholders. And then we'll look at really what the outcomes have been and what kinds of results that we're seeing, and share that information with you. So that's our plan for today, and we are going to jump right in. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Linda, and she's going to start by kind of sharing what her regulatory world looks like and some of the challenges that she had to face.
All right, thanks, Jen. Thanks, Steve. Again, hi, everybody. My name is Linda Ann Holt. I'm the EHS Training Manager for the Mosaic Company. I've been here for almost 2 years, but prior to joining Mosaic, I was doing compliance training and a variety of other training focus areas, but primarily compliance training for steel manufacturing organizations as well as banking and finance. So I got here 2 years ago, And there was a need to look at our new hire training program because we are highly regulated around OSHA requirements as well as MSHA requirements. And if you're not familiar with MSHA, it is the mining side of OSHA, if you will. So if you think about health and safety of anyone everywhere, OSHA covers that. But the mining employees are something a little different. It's a high-risk environment, as are many of the other environments that we work in. But MSHA is a lot more prescriptive in terms of what they want covered, how long they want topics covered, and what the focus needs to be. So part of the mandate that we had was we have to do a minimum of 24 hours of facilitator-led training. There is no blended learning. There is no e-learning. It has to be completely facilitator-led. And in addition to that, beyond the first initial 24 hours, employees are also required to receive 8 hours, again, of facilitator-led training every year. So depending upon what topic it is and how long we're supposed to present, we were presented quite a few challenges, to say the least, of how do we redesign both the new hire program and the annual refresher program. And I should say that a lot of those topics are identical in both programs. So when we think about what we were experiencing, this picture really says it all. This was the picture that a lot of learners coming into new hire training, they had this look. Here we go again. What are they going to tell me that I've already heard before? If I've been around industry at all, I've been trained on the same thing for the same way for years and years and years. They were experiencing the death by PowerPoint. They experienced death by PowerPoint for 4 long days, 8 hours a day. One of the other challenges that we had was we only had one person on our team at that time who could deliver new hire training, and he retired. I should also tell you that our learning and development department here at Mosaic is only 3 years old. So the team that was here in advance wasn't a full-on training team, and they were doing the best that they could do, and they were doing a good job. But when that one person retires, you're thrown into, oh my gosh, now what do we do? So we actually had to contract him back after retirement to cover us while we worked on the new program here. And what you saw were learners were just not engaged. They spent the day just listening to lectures. They didn't really talk to each other. They didn't learn from each other. They didn't really share experiences. So the other side of this is, as all of us have, stakeholder requirements. The first and foremost is whatever we did had to meet the regulatory requirements. The other problem we were trying to solve is some of our senior leadership said, oh, please don't make me go through this annual training refresher again. I don't care what you do, just fix it. The other challenge is we wanted to keep people engaged, but engaged around safety, compliance topics that are not necessarily the most interesting things sometimes to talk about. And then we wanted to connect to our safety culture, talking about everyone can go home the same way that they ultimately came in. So we set about establishing the goals for the overall program. And we set about the idea of creating engagement, that this was the first exposure that many people had had to Mosaic, and this was a great opportunity to connect them to Mosaic, the business, the culture of safety, and everything else along the way. The second thing that we needed to do was to build a little bit of business acumen. When I came into the organization 2 years ago, I went through this exact same Death by PowerPoint program, and being new to the industry, I didn't feel like I had a really good understanding of who Mosaic is, what Mosaic does and how all the pieces really fit together, but I knew the safety talks, I knew the topics, and I had heard it all before as well. So that was something we wanted to work on. One of the other things, obviously, is we wanted to use new hire training as a way to support the overall safety culture in the organization. There's not enough focus anywhere in any industry around the safety culture. You can't do too much. So we knew that we wanted to do that. And then obviously we wanted to ensure that whatever training solution we were putting into place met the regulatory requirements. And they were steep. Like I said before, 24 hours instructor-led, 8 hours a year going forward, same things every time. So how do we do all of that and still keep it interesting? So that's when we reached out to Bottom Line, and I met Jen, and I'll let her tell you a little bit about what we did from there.
Thanks, Linda. And I'm sure that many of those challenges feel familiar to you and are ones that you have had to face in your own way too. And it can feel exhausting, but I really think that Linda did a great job of setting a vision for what the program could be, and I'm really working hard to bring it to fruition. So we're going to, like I mentioned at the beginning, we really want to share with you some pieces of things that we designed. And I'm going to start by sharing with you kind of the overall goals and kind of themes that we used in both of the courses. So for the 8-hour annual refresher training, these are our two kind of terminal objectives or goals of what we wanted to accomplish. And these were woven into all of the MSHA required topics and discussions, and we really wanted to help those stakeholders see how we can make that discussion richer by bringing in this idea of really trying to change behavior through the annual refresher rather than just checking a box. So one way that we did that is through a character named Murphy Minor. And you can see him here. He looks like kind of a tough guy, and he is not super safe. For those of you that are familiar with industries that require PPE or personal protective equipment, you'll see he is not doing it right. And so the challenge in the one-day class is to really clear all of his destruction out of the mining site. And I'm going to show you that map of what that looks like. But more importantly, to help Murphy change, for him to change him from someone who's really unsafe to someone who really is safe and is caring about both the safety of himself as well as people around them. So this is a snippet of a map that hung on the wall in the class. And each of these sections, there are things that are going on that are not good. So this guy down here in the left-hand corner is getting electrocuted. This guy, Murphy's got some boxes, it's hard to see, I know, that are going to be falling on this guy's head. This guy's smoking where he's not supposed to. And so each of these boxes represent an MSHA required topic that we had to discuss in the class. And throughout the class, then the facilitator covered this section with what good would look like in that environment at Mosaic. And so we used that as both kind of to set up a challenge and keep engagement throughout the course, as well as they can kind of see the progress that they're making throughout there. So that was kind of the theme and structure that we used for the annual refresher training. And I'll show you a couple of activities that we did in that here in a moment. And so then the goals for the new hire training. So there are many more. You can see it was a 4-day class, so we wanted to accomplish more. And you'll see really this first objective goes to what Linda was talking about as far as building some business acumen, that we wanted to take that on while they're just starting with Mosaic to certainly make sure that they grasp the importance of working safely for themselves, the people that they work with, and all of their families, but to also recognize kind of why they're doing it, to see where their specific role plays into the larger picture of what Mosaic is really trying to do, which is to be able to, feed the growing population through their products. So these were our goals, and then we used several different techniques to accomplish those. One of those was a learning map. So we wanted to show you this. This is a hand-drawn image of what Linda had kind of thought the map might look like. So when she and her team were starting to work on this project, they really liked the idea, knowing that it had to be facilitator-led, that we would use a learning map and use it to kind of drive some of the interactions that we would use throughout the course. So she had drawn this, and you can see it really starts from the beginning of a mining process of identifying where we might be doing a mine, all the way to distribution and getting products into their customers' hands. And that image turned into this. So we at VLP have some really talented graphic artists on staff, and we went down to their offices and were able to kind of take that and turn it into what you see here that has different areas that represent all of the different parts of that process, as well as the topics that we know we needed to cover as part of the new hire class. This is really large. So this is about 48 by 36 inches. So it sits on kind of a round table, and it's used throughout the class to be able to for different kinds of activities, and I'll show you how that works. You'll see little numbers down here, and those become stops on a game in another activity. So that was kind of the theme or structure for both the annual refresher training as well as the new hire, and I want to talk a little bit now about some of the specific things that we did as part of new hire to help meet those objectives. So one of those was through stories. So we really know, and you all, if you're in the learning field, know that stories are what resonate. Stories are what people remember, much more so than lectures or facts. And so we really wanted to incorporate those. Linda and her team went out on site with their iPhones and recorded stories. They found the folks that, you always have those people that have been at your organization for a while that everybody knows has the good stories. And those were the folks that they found. And we then took those video clips and played them at different spots throughout the workshop to really help reinforce what we're talking about, and for even people to see folks working in their environment that they're actually going to be in and kind of what that looks like. And Linda will share later on just how memorable so much of that was. And so this was something that we didn't, spend a lot of time gathering them. Like I said, we used phones to record it, and it worked just fine. And it was really about just capturing those stories. And I know Linda and her team want to continue to do that, so they have kind of a really good library of those stories that they can include. The final really day of new hire training is an accumulative activity, which is a game that we called Feed the World. So what you see in the middle of the screen is that same learning map that we had before, and then there were two pieces that get stuck on either side that kind of help turn it into a game board. And so it's a collaborative game. They're working in small groups to really, their goal is to meet the growing population needs. So Mosaic products turn into mostly fertilizer, which allows crops to be more productive and to grow. And so the goal is that we're allowing enough crops to be grown to feed the world. So if our goal is to feed 81 million people, they have to gather enough phosphate rocks. So they have little rocks that they're collecting, and they will need to be able to feed enough for each year. So this is year 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the goal, the minimum goal is right here, and that gets harder and harder each year as they work. So they do 4 rounds, and to get through a round, they go through each step here on the map. And so there's 7 steps here. So they have to get through each one, and each year it gets harder. So while the kind of game mechanic is very similar all the way through the year, they have to get better if they're really going to be successful. And so this is a game that takes a little while to play, but it's a really great way to have them apply and put together the activities that they've been learning all the way through the new hire class, all the way through. So I'm going to show you an example of what they do. So this is all based on scenario cards. So this is a scenario where you're working in an area and it's so loud that you can't hear each other talk, even though you're standing next to each other. So what resource is the best choice to use in this case? And so they have a list of those that they have to select from. And then the back side of the card is here. So someone at your table is looking at the back side as you're making a choice. And in this case, it's PPE. And then you have to say, okay, that's right, what kind of PPE? And it might be earplugs, it might be earplugs plus earmuffs, or it might be something else, but they have to know what that exact thing is. So if they select the correct resource and have the right explanation, they get 1 phosphate rock. So you as a table are all trying to answer as well as you can so that you can get enough rock to meet your goal for that year. To make it a little harder, we also do have an additional challenge in years 3 and 4 that they have to answer, which are typically kind of fact-based kinds of questions. So in this example, is ear protection needed in the house on the drag line? It's a yes or no question. So you have to get both things right in years 3 and 4 to be able to get the rock and earn some points for your team. So what we really wanted to do was to not make all of the rounds feel really repetitive, but to also really make it challenging and give us the chance to review as much as we possibly could or apply everything that we could from the course. So that's kind of what we were trying to do with that game. So that's one of the larger activities that we have in the new hire course. Another thing we used both in the annual refresher and the new hire were lots of cards, and we would reuse them. Even these are graphics that were taken off of that map. And this is an example where we had a little activity where they had to work as quickly as they could to kind of put the process in the right order. You could do this with any kind of process, anything that goes step 1, 2, 3. And so really just helping them start to understand what are all of the steps and what's the order that they're going to work in. We used cards to do this kind of thing. We used cards to talk about different kinds of fires and what you can use to fight different kinds of fires, some matching activities. Cards can be a really easy way in a facilitator led kind of environment to keep them engaged and help them learn without having to go through a lecture. So we could have given them a lecture here, right? We could have said, okay, we're now going to tell you about the 7 steps of the mind-to-market process. But instead, we had them figure it out and then debrief it and let them kind of learn by doing. Another thing we did is we would do different kinds of puzzles. And this is an example of, it's a puzzle where you have to match essentially this question with the answer card. When you put the answer card on top of the question, you build an image, and you have to get all of those cards in the right place for the image to make sense. So this is the actual image that they were trying to build. One thing you'll notice about it is that it's kind of a difficult image to put together on your own. It's a lot of the same color, right? A lot of gray, a lot of different pipes going different ways. We didn't want it to just be a really simple image where they could then just try to, work it like a regular puzzle. We wanted them to really have to think about what is the right answer that goes with this, so that they could use that as an engaging way to review at the end of the day, for example, what they've learned. We also did a lot of hazard hunts. So these were some drawings that we did of different areas at Mosaic and different kinds of things that they might have. And they were given these in the form of a laminated card. And then as a group, they would go around and kind of pass them around and try to find as many hazards as they could. So it was a really great way of teaching them to really be aware of their surroundings and start to think about some of the things that they learned. So this is, for example, some potential hazards that they should be looking for. And so these were things that we wanted them to highlight. And so then the facilitator simply use these to then debrief and make the key points that they wanted to. So really, in general, the process that they use in the class is interaction, activity, debrief discussion, and the debrief and discussion is where the learning really happens, which we've just found to be a really effective way to make sure that it actually sticks. I wanted to show you another hazard hunt here because we do have employees in this course that sometimes aren't really working on a mine, and it can be easy for them to feel like this doesn't apply to me. I'm in an office environment. I don't have to worry about safety. Well, we know that's not the case, right? So this is actually a drawing of the lobby at Mosaic's offices and kind of what it looks like. And this was one of the images that they had to look at and really think about where are those hazards and what can they be looking for even when they're at the office to make sure that they work safely and that everyone around them does as well. Another thing that we did here, so we had a challenge where it's not really safe for us to take a bunch of new hires out to a mine site and teach, and have them just kind of wandering around looking at stuff. But we wanted them to have some sense of scale and some sense of when we talk about, well, you shouldn't stand this close to a drag line, or your truck needs to be this far away from here, what does that really look like? So we actually have little sandboxes that each table has, and you can see here kind of the little cutouts. These are all to scale. So they have a little ruler here, and so one of their activities is they're given different scenarios, and they have to place both the people and equipment and in the correct proximity to what it actually is out on the drag line, just to start getting them to really think about how far that is away. You can even see here in the corner, there's a little angle measure here because they have to kind of pay attention to how high dirt or rock might be stacked and really start to think about what that angle looks like. So we really tried to come up with creative ways where we knew we couldn't take them out in the field, but how can we bring the field to them? How can we have them be making decisions that have some context to allow them to really understand what they need to be thinking about when they are actually out in the field. So that's one of the things that is also a really nice tactile break for everybody to kind of be able to get out there and play in some sand. So that's, no one ever typically complains too much about that. But the one thing I will say is anytime we really tried to do something fun, it wasn't just about fun. It was about engagement, and it was about helping them engage on a very specific topic and on something that we knew was a critical piece for them to learn. The last interaction that I really want to share with you is a really simple activity from Annual Refresher. So you might be saying, well, I don't know, I don't have someone who can draw really amazing things on my staff, or I don't know how to create cards or whatever it might be. But really it's about helping people kind of start thinking on their own and owning the solution. So this is an example where this is literally a list of the MSHA standards. And one of the things we have them do towards the end of the day of the annual refresher training is take a look at that topic and think about, okay, what are ways that we can show interdependence, or where we can show that I care about the safety of myself, everyone around me, and my goal is for all of us to be able to go home the way that we came, and have them come up with those ideas and have them come up with what are the potential consequences when we don't act that way. Because we all get in bad habits, we all can get in a rush, but we often don't think about what those consequences would be. And so this is a really rich discussion and something that really helps them, especially when they're doing the course as a site together. They can really be talking about what are some things that we can own and what are some things that we can do to really, it's about meeting the MSHA standards, but it's also really about making sure that we're all safe. And so those are just a small sampling of the kinds of interactions and things that we did in both of the courses to really keep learners engaged and really help them make the connection between the topic and kind of risk tolerance, as well as really, looking out for everybody at the site. So I'm going to turn it back over to Linda, who's going to talk a little bit about kind of how we made sure that we were meeting all of those regulatory requirements.
All right, thanks, Jen. You know, it's interesting as I was looking back at the pictures and thinking back to that creative process, and it's interesting now to see where the program is and running and the success we're having that came off of that little crazy sketch that we drew on a big flip chart, and we kept that flip chart. It's in a file somewhere because we were so proud of where we were and then where we are. So not to digress a little bit, but it's just a nice reminder for us to say, you know, we really had a vision and we stuck to it. When we start talking about regulatory requirements and you're dealing with government agencies and OSHA and MSHA, I think one of the first things that occurred to me is how are my stakeholders and how is the MSHA representative, how are they going to react to this, what I would have probably in their shoes called a very radical approach to how we're doing this training. And surprisingly, I didn't have to do a whole lot of convincing. I had some email exchanges, some phone calls with my local MSHA representatives, with my Southeastern District representatives, and just a variety of people outside of the organization, and said, look, here's what we're thinking. And we're thinking that creating additional learner engagement actually is going to help keep them more aware and keep them safer based on the risks and everything else. And again, surprisingly, they said, wow, that sounds really interesting. Just, you know, make sure you've got everything documented so that we can look at it and go forth and conquer. We'll be interested to see what you have. So we provided a sample of the high-level design document that we pulled together after the design workshop, and I provided all of this to to our stakeholders internal as well as the folks at MSHA, and I said, all right, this is what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, what the outcome of it is anticipated to be, and then again focusing on keeping our employees, our miners, safe. So again, after they saw the documentation, I think they've probably never seen anything to that level of detail, but we got the blessing and we got move forward and go with it. So throughout the whole process, we kept them in constant communication, gave them updates on where we are, what we're thinking about doing. We shared agendas and meeting notes, and like I said, the design document, we shared pieces of the content as we were developing it, and we developed a structured facilitator guide, a structured participant guide, a set of PowerPoint slides and that kind of thing, which I think, again, kind of overwhelmed a lot of people, but at least we knew that we were covering the bases. And I think one of the biggest things that we did is we invited anybody from local or Southeastern District of MSHA to, you know, please feel free to join us in the class. And so we kind of did that as a proactive measure because MSHA shows up unexpectedly to our training classes, to our mine sites, to our offices and everything else, just to kind of check and make sure that we're doing the things that we said that we were going to do. So when we came time to actually pilot the program, we had local MSHA representatives stopping in at the annual refresher training and just really wanting to see what it was all about. And we got really positive feedback. So we took that as a big win, not only from an internal standpoint, but we've shown the regulatory agency we can do something different by creating this kind of a program. So from there, Jen, did you have something you wanted to add?
Go ahead.
Okay. From there, we started about how do we deploy it. ART, or annual refresher training, as we call it, ART, was an easier course. It was 8 hours, so it was a lot easier to do first and then leverage that content for the next program, which was New Hire. So we actually deployed ART in September of last year. We did a pilot at an actual physical mine site. We hired an external facilitator who had proven success with being able to deliver the kind of content and the energy that we wanted. We had real participants. It wasn't just an audience of people for feedback and whatever, and delivered the program. And some of the comments are noted there on the slide, but people were saying, this isn't what I expected. I expected to come to the same program that I've been coming to for the past 20 years, facilitated by or lectured by the same person in the same way and see the same stuff I've always seen. And one of the big takeaways from an internal stakeholder was that, wow, this is really how we've changed the culture of safety. So that for us was a huge win, that we'd taken this really radical approach to doing something, and we had that kind of feedback, that kind of initial response. So feeding into New Hire, a lot of the content that we had with ART was exactly the same as it was in New Hire, so we were able to leverage between the two. And we rolled it out in November of last year, so we're right at that 1 year mark coming up for having had the program rolled out. Again, we did it with real live New Hire employees. What transpired to create a learning experience, if you will, we did a major 5S or a cleanup of the training facility. We added color to the tables. We added mosaic banners featuring our employees and messages about our production. We put our training team in a uniform shirt, if you will, and by uniform it just means we're wearing a mosaic piece of clothing, and they were coordinated colors and that kind of thing, created this welcoming environment. Put a lot of tactile toys on the table, which actually happened to be vegetables, because we literally tied everything back to, we help the world grow the food it needs, which is the mission of the company. And we told the facilitators, you guys, doesn't have to be perfect, just has to get out there, let's get comfortable with it. And we had about 11 people in the class, and again, response was, wow, this is not what I expected. I had heard that I was coming to New Hire training and I had to brace myself because I was going to be taking a nap for 4 days and I wasn't going to hear anything new. And so some of that feedback just kind of, again, it was the fueling of the fire, if you will, that we had done the right thing for the right reasons and we're creating the kind of engagement that we wanted. So when we talk about the actual outcomes of the course, we're fortunate enough that we use the Metrics That Matter system to track all of our evaluations for us. And we, through online and paper instruments, we actually gather all that feedback, and the learners have had a very, very positive response to it when we've gone out later and asked the managers for what their observations were about those new hires, you know, what were they seeing, and really pleased that the outcomes really focused around 4 different areas. So the first of which was an improved job performance, that they were saying, yeah, they could see people being more aware, more focused on what was going on. They seemed to know a little bit more about the business when they showed up. They were more aware of the hazards and risks associated with their work. we feel like we've really improved compliance because now we can actually track from what's covered in the class, how we've done it, and prove that we are in fact meeting, if not exceeding, some of the expectations of the compliance requirements. And then lastly, we know for a fact that we are increasing engagement. And that's a big win. So when we talk about the program, we talk about it's a learner experience that does all of these things while still covering the basics. So we're really happy over that. So I've got a few more details about the outcomes. So our new hire class is delivered on average about twice a month. And the numbers here reflect about 6 to 8 months of data that we were able to collect, and obviously a very positive trend. And then knowing that your program that you've designed has that direct correlation to improved job performance, I think is why many of us are in the field of learning and development. And so that's just a big win to know that there's direct correlation there and to have the metrics that prove it. Obviously, being an organization focused on safety, we always want to be focused on what are we doing to decrease our risks, recognize the hazards, and promote the behaviors that keep us all safe. So here, the numbers really do show that people are, the new employees are really striving toward identifying more of the risks and everything else. And it's just like in any other organization, it's the new person that's always going to ask, why do we do this? Or should I be doing this? Or I'm not going to do that. And they have the right absolutely to stop work based on the fact that it's not a safe environment. But we rely on those new hires to really show the old guys well, the experienced, seasoned folks that have been out there for forever, to really point out the hazards and to help keep everyone safe. So that interdependent culture again. The story that we told you about earlier with nickname Robert Roberts, when he was telling his safety story, the thing that people take away is that one of the things he said in the video is, with just one more inch, I wouldn't be here to tell my story. One more inch and I would have had a really, really severe accident. And so the one takeaway, if they don't take away anything else, they take away that it just takes just that much, so that just 1 inch. So you see them making the hand gesture of just 1 inch made all the difference. So we think that's a pretty cool quote and a pretty cool takeaway. So with regard to improving compliance, we know that we're doing what we need to do to cover us on compliance, but we also know that we're creating a positive impact and we're doing more than what is actually required. They say we have to have 24 hours of training. We actually do a full 4-day program, so we're going above and beyond. And again, we can track back to all of the requirements and tell them exactly what we're doing. The engagement scores, again, we're only dealing with about 6 to 8 months of data here on this slide, but the trend is really positive. We're really looking forward to trending this over time, and our goal is to keep that program fresh and not let it get stale, as well as the annual refresher to not let it get stale either. So we're constantly looking for what's changing in the regulatory environment, what's changing with engagement within the organization, what's changing in the business unit, that needs to keep it fresh and keep it alive and that kind of thing. And if there's a way that we can shake it up to make sure that we're continuing to increase these engagement scores, then that's absolutely what we're going to do. So the next couple of slides just are a few of the comments and things that people have written on their surveys that gave us the little, yeah, we've done this. We've got a really good program here and really exciting. That first one about this is setting the bar for good training, and then I'll just pause and let you read through the rest of these.
Thanks, Linda. So you guys can really see that the feedback has been really great, as well as the business results, right, which is what's really important and what you want to be able to show to your stakeholders. And I certainly think that's reflected here. So Linda and I are just really proud that we recently won a gold award from the Brandon Hall Group of Excellence in Learning and the Best Advanced for Compliance Training. This was the only program that was awarded a gold in this category, and I think it really just reflects all of those outcomes that Linda's just been talking to you about, and really a program that was managed really well from design all the way through to implementation, and I think that reflects that. So we are just really proud and both looking forward to celebrating that win at those awards in January. So as we look to wrap up here, we want to finish a little early so that we can answer any questions that you might have. You might be facing similar things, even if it's a different industry. The challenges are really common, right? And so as we think about what really has helped us be successful, helped us get all the way to the end, these 5 things really felt like the things that we wanted to highlight for you, or would be our advice for you as you look at your own programs or things that you do. And so the first one here is just to be creative and to really be willing to set aside the status quo, to learn from other industries, which is what you might be doing on this webinar right now, and to really challenge assumptions about how things have to be done, how things need to be accomplished, even when you feel like it's really being dictated from the groups that you're working with, and that oftentimes there are ways to work with them and to collaborate with them to be able to accomplish that. And so I just think I encourage you to challenge that status quo in your organization. The second thing that really will allow you to do the first one is to make sure that you're meeting the stakeholders' needs, and we never lost sight of that. Even when we had a really, idea that we thought was really great, we really made sure that it tied back to those stakeholders' needs of reducing risk tolerance, to make sure that they're staying compliant, and show those correlations really clearly so that everybody felt comfortable. We wanted to view our stakeholders as another partner, not a group that, whether that be regulatory agencies or internal folks at Mosaic, they're not a group that we're combative with, but that are one of our partners. And we wanted to bring them into the process and help them really see kind of what we were trying to accomplish, which I think really helped us be successful. Linda?
Absolutely. The one thing that really helped us was to build on our past wins. And as I mentioned earlier, the L&D department is only now just 3 years old. And a year ago, January of 15, we actually launched the very first class that was performance-based training in our pre-job risk assessment program. And it was a structured facilitator guide and a deck and activities and that kind of thing. It was the first time the organization had seen anything. And it was met with really good success. People were really impressed with it. So we leveraged on that win and carried that momentum forward to create more energy and excitement for what we were trying to do with annual refresher and new hires. So again, if you've got something that you can align to that builds on a past success, that's an absolute great place to start to get stakeholder buy-in on something new. Staying focused is another key point. There had been a history of another department saying, hey, I want to come into new hire training and I want to talk about whatever. And they expected to be able to do that, continue to do that in the redesigned program, but we had to step back and say our real focus was about the goals of the program. And while it might be nice and wonderful to talk about, pick a topic, but it didn't relate back to the core safety of the organization, the culture. It didn't relate back to a regulatory requirement or engagement. And quite literally, it wasn't training, it was more communication. They just wanted to stand up and tell people about what was going on. So it's really important to stay focused and make sure you don't get scope creep. I mean, we experience that in all kinds of projects, but when you're looking at a training program, I think that's still really, really key. And lastly, but certainly not at the bottom of the list, is finding the right partner. When you've invested a lot of time and energy into creating a vision, finding the right partner who can help you execute that vision is unparalleled in terms of really being able to translate what you saw earlier, a drawing, into that the final product, to take those key messages and integrate them into learning activities. And that's what Bottom Line did for us. So by and large, I'm a huge proponent of finding the right partner, and that could be an internal partner, it could be an external partner, and for us that was Bottom Line. So I'm so thankful to have had the opportunity to work with Jen and the crew at Bottom Line, because without them I wouldn't be sitting here talking about the program and talking about the Brandon Hall Award and just being really proud of what we've accomplished as a team in such a short period of time. So I'm going to leave you with one last thought from my chair, and that is to remember that just because it's compliance training, it doesn't have to be dull, it doesn't have to be boring, and it doesn't have to be repetitive year after year.
Well, I think that's a great way to end things on. So I'm going to turn it over to Steve and see if we have any questions from the group.
Yeah, thank you so much. Inspiring way to end it, Linda. So I want to invite everybody, now is a great time to type your questions into the questions area, and I will read those off to Jen. The number one question we received is, will we be able to access a recording? And yes, this is being recorded right now, and we will get that out probably tomorrow morning. That'll be sent out to you guys. Another question, this one's for Jen. Have you applied these techniques using self-paced training modules such as Articulate Storyline?
Absolutely, absolutely. So it can absolutely be done in e-learning. One of the examples that just pops to mind is an e-learning course we used that was built in Storyline that was for a compliance requirement, also on safety for building evacuation. Like what is the process? What is the required training employees had to do? And so instead of just telling them, okay, here are the steps that you're supposed to follow, they were put in situations where I want to say, I think there were like 3 buildings different kinds of buildings that they had to evacuate, and they had to figure out how to get out. And so if they made a bunch of mistakes, they didn't make it out. And so it really allowed them to see the consequences of that, those decisions that they made, as well as learn a process. So you can absolutely do it in self-paced or e-learning. It's just really a matter of kind of identifying what your goals are and setting up realistic challenges in context that can give people a chance to practice those in that environment.
I would add to that, because Teresa also chimed in with a similar question. We've got a lot of samples of e-learning on our website, and I would say that in a lot of cases, the samples that we have up there were in response to a similar challenge, especially if you can sort it by compliance and regulatory and just see things around those topics. This question is for Linda. I know the answer to it, but I'm going to let you field it and talk a little bit about it. Were the facilitators Mosaic employees?
They were, actually. I have 2 full-time facilitators on my staff, both of which have a safety background and have come into the learning organization and what we're trying to do and all about to kind of go in a different direction. So we, unfortunately or fortunately, depends on how you look at it, we don't have the capacity to do all of the annual refresher training every year because the number of sessions is just more than 2 people can handle. But we do all of the new hire training, and then we also teach that annual refresher for a centralized group as well.
Great. And we've got another question here. You mentioned keeping annual refresher training fresh and up to date. How do you plan to do that? Does that mean redesigning and redeveloping the game on a regular basis, or is it more along the lines of content updates to stay in line with regulatory changes?
That's a great question. One of the things that I wanted to create when we put together in a refresher training was kind of a focus around whatever was current and relevant in the business. If we were having safety incidents around a specific area, or if we were not recognizing risks in a certain area, that we would be able to develop the program and focus it in on that. So we do the content changes, we do the regulatory changes and that kind of thing. We do it on an annual basis, but we also try to find what's hot in the business right now and integrate that into the course without a massive change. So we're not touching the game and hope to not have to touch that for a while.
Great. All right, everybody. Well, that looks like we've answered all the questions. So, Jen, I guess you can, yeah, after the webinar, we will send out the recording. We'll also send out the slides here. Our next webinar, we're going to be sending out an invitation to that next week, actually. It won't be coming with the recording. But our next webinar is a special webinar. It's going to be focused on a new app that we're adding to our Knowledge Guru family of products. So we thought it was special enough that we were going to devote our Lessons on Learning webinar to it. And I will be your presenter, so I hope you'll join me in early December for that. So that's all we have for you today. Thank you so much, everybody that's on the line here that has joined us for the webinar. We really do appreciate it. Jennifer and Linda's contact information is up on the screen, and our main phone number and website for Bottom Line Performance are also on the screen. So I encourage you to check us out. I sent out a link in the chat with some other samples related to regulatory compliance training if you'd like to see more of those. So once again, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to our wonderful presenters.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.